Malcolm's not here. No one's heard from him. Hopefully he's on the way. So we'll start the meeting with the karakia. Whakatakataho ki te uru, whakatakataho ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, I he akiana ti atakura, hi tio, hi huka, hi hohu, ti he mori ora. Welcome everyone. Before we start, I was just going to do a couple of things before we hook into the thing. I thought it might be, I was hoping there's going to be the other two members were going to be here too, but we can still do this going around the room, and it's important that we have this meeting. We know the direction that we're going to be going in, and as the chair, I have the privilege of collating all the information. So I thought it might be poignant to maybe have a quick once around the room about what we all want to see this committee achieve, and your initial thoughts on the communities of interest, and any thoughts about the engagement with the community that you may have up front. And I think it's a good thing to sort of just to get out there. So let's start with Lydia.
Sorry, what now?
So, okay, right. So let's start with Sam. You'll pick it up all the time he gets around here.
I think communities of interest. That's
Good afternoon.
the first question there. Changes all the time, and so particularly in a growing community, we end up in a space where the things that people travel to and from can change. The places where families connect, and whether it's the clubs or associations that they are a part of, change as our district changes. So yeah, that doesn't look the same as it did in 1990 or 2005 or now in 2023. I think that probably the community is the best place to tell us what their interests are and where they sort of coalesce around. And we will have views on that, I'm sure, as a committee. And we in the end need to think about at what level are we going to start drawing some lines and boundaries, because in the end this exercise ends up doing that somewhere. But hearing firstly from communities about what's important to them and where they feel that sense of connection being. Because for some of them it will just be their own town, and I think it's unlikely we're going to get to a space where we elect a person from every town. But maybe, you know, that's one of those things. Or the other side to that is we don't have any lines and everyone's just a part of Selwyn. But I think the research we did 3 years ago or 2 years ago through the last report basically said there weren't too many people that felt much of an affinity to the word Selwyn and the name Selwyn, and there was a whole lot more that was connected to either their main town or even to Canterbury. Like there's a regional connection more than there might be to the word Selwyn. So yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see where that goes. What was the first part of your question?
The first part, you've covered it all too. What do you see as what do you want to see? What do you want to see this committee achieve? But I think
so. I guess, and so finally on that then is that this committee sets up a structure that enables the next council to be the most representative of our community to enable good decisions for it, and that also means having people with the right governance level of aptitude to be able to be here, as much as it is everyone wanting their neighbour to sit here because they can affiliate with them. So there's going to be a balance between having everyone and actually having the right sort of people sit here. And at the moment, the Future for Local Government is asking those same questions for the country, and that will challenge: is there a Selwyn District Council into the future? And so if there's a regional unitary body, which is one of the things that has been talked about, then where is the Selwyn voice and flavour in that sort of model? And so while we're thinking about what's the sub-Selwyn type breakups, actually we need to also, I think, be thinking about how does the Selwyn voice and community effort and influence for the region hold together when Selwyn District Council may or may not exist going forward.
Okay, thank you. Just for Malcolm and Lydia, who wasn't listening first time around, We're just doing a quick once around with the questioner. What do you all want to see from this committee achieve? Your initial thoughts on communities of interest, and any thoughts you may have on how to engage with the community. We're just going to whip around. So,
tēnā rā tātou, te whare tēnei, tēnā koe, te mana whenua, tēnā koe, Mr. Chair, tēnā koe, mahara mai, kai whakahaere David, tēnā koe, kura matua Sam, Deputy Mayor, my fellow colleagues, kai mahi, tēnā koe. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on the appointment to the chair position. The Representation Review Subcommittee for me is probably something that for 200 years the Māori people have actually been wanting more a part of, and we see that coming through now. And as I reflect on the previous Representation Review that I was a part of and have a look through those agendas, it really weaves a lovely story of representation through the influence of those that were around the table at the time, from the adoption of Te Tiriti o Waitangi here in our chambers, the more kōrero on bilingual signage, and to the potential appointments of our mana whenua representatives. The question around what do I want to see is probably the same as what everybody else wants to see, and that's fair representation of everyone within the district through their elected members and leaders. What that looks like will be determined through the process of this committee, and what is the best interests of the district. So whether it's less or more, or whether it's more, or mostly needs to be more effective. So that will come in due course, I believe, and I would hope so. And yes, just wanted to commend the committee in that mahi ati ki te mahi. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Shane. Awesome. Lydia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologise for my lack of engagement in the initial talks of your conversation. I think that I would really like to see some engagement from our communities. I think that it's something, you look at election time and I just feel like the engagement's really lacking, and if we could try, and I think we've got a great opportunity to rethink the way that we engage with people. And even in saying that, our constituents, when they are voting for us, I don't think they're actually aware of the governance role that we have around the table. It's more that they want someone that will give them their voice. So maybe there's an education piece that needs to go alongside that as well. And yeah, I guess our communities of interest, I look around Melbourne and I've got sort of 9 significant townships, and it's, to represent all of them becomes quite difficult. But it's something that we need to do, and I need to utilise my community board to get around that, I think. Yeah, I look forward to the work that we do.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Malcolm.
It's a very horny chestnut is getting people to get involved. I think the cards are against it in that our education system is not teaching governance in our schools to get young people involved in what happens and why it happens, and right down to the need to vote and having a franchise and all those things. Getting our communities involved in the decision making is a complicated and difficult thing, as David will attest to. We've tried many things over the years, be it town hall meetings, which don't tend to get well represented unless you're in certain areas, which brings me back to a bit of history where we have, from amalgamation in 1989, was a huge amount of parochialism between Ellesmere, Melvin and Springs. Ellesmere and Melvin was probably a larger amount of parochialism than Springs, because part of Springs was Ellesmere up to Boundary Road on the edge of Lincoln was Ellesmere. That's why it's called Boundary Road. And Springs was the remnants of Paparoa County, which with Templeton taken out. And there was a huge amount of parochialism at the start, with the sharing of assets, the who had what money left over from when things were thrown together. Some of that is still existing, unfortunately, in our more far-flung 9 communities, I have to say, Lydia. And our balance has always been, I've been on this committee many times over the last 20 years, and the balance has always been that damn 10 plus or minus 10% rule, which has made it very hard to get the mesh blocks, to get the people represented. As to what is our community of interest, that is getting harder to define. In the rural areas, our community of interest is easy to define because there are big linkages between the likes of our sporting clubs and familial intermarriage over the years. People who are in one area and have been in Southbridge, say, and play for Southbridge. There's an animosity between Leaston. But those people have married different groups, and people from that area have also married people from the Melbourne area, and they play rugby that way. And there's a huge rural community connectedness out there, which we don't have in the Lincolns, Prebbletons and Rollistons.
Yeah.
So that gives us a different sort of subsets of people in our community. And I see that in the way they communicate and a lot of things, a lot of their wants and desires as well. So I think our big struggle is going to be making sure the rural people have their voice heard over the large blocks and larger increasing blocks of urban people who are not that interested, quite frankly. And to get those urban people interested is the issue. How do you do that? But then that's the interest part of it. But then we've still got to sit down and say, where are the lines on the map? And the plus or minus 10%. And those blocks do that. I can remember several years ago, we should have knocked Ellesmere down to one councillor because the population of Ellesmere was falling. I believe it's growing again. And we moved boundaries to keep 2 councillors in Ellesmere. Melbourne, huge amount of work. You've got all those committees. You've got a community board which has never been that efficient. And you've got a huge amount of people to cover. So you expect 2 councillors out there to deal with a huge amount of areas. Our changes to the township committees have made a difference there as well, because I think some of those township committees thought they were councils in their own right. So I think we are seeing a change. Just how we get the word out, get people organised and interested is one thing. Bearing in mind, we've still got to set those blocks of where the people are to fit the needs. Sam's comment about what's coming in the future.
Yeah.
Could be massive. We could be, Selwyn District could be a community board. And there could be a huge council over large swaths of the place, but we don't know that at the moment. So trying to set ourselves up for that. Yes, I think that long-term thinking is, how do we say, is it for us to say to the people in this review, think past that, or are you actually buying yourself a fight doing that? So a lot of no answers there. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, and apologies for lateness. I get held up by the board on the way.
No problems. Thanks for that, Malcolm. I mean, obviously, the amount of history that you yourself carry is enormous.
Yeah,
I'm not calling you old, but I'm going to just move to Dave. Then I've got some wrapping up on this thing.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess the thing that's changed most in the last few years is the traditional views of Selwyn and the way we think about our district and the way we interact with each other as new people have come in, as land use has changed, and certainly as the demographic has changed as well. You know, we know that the population has increased exponentially, but the average age has come down. Still, one of the starting points for me when we're talking to the community is understanding what our communities want from their council, and in turn what they want from their councillors, and what best serves the interest of the district, not the little hamlets within the district or the defined electoral wards. Malcolm's talked about growth patterns, and they have not been even. They are going to force some quite significant changes or potential changes in this election. We also talked about the changes in committees, and I question whether the disestablishment of community committees has affected the communities or whether it's affected the people that used to be on the committees. And I think the jury's still out on that. Number of councillors, I again think that will be one of the outcomes that we're looking at in terms of representation, and there is the potential as boundaries for wards are changed. So too the number of councillors in 2 of our wards particularly. And the final bit of advice in terms of engagement with the public, don't ask people to come to a public meeting to discuss this, but rather present yourselves to where the public already are. Go down to Selwyn Aquatic Centre Monday through Friday between 3:30 and 6 o'clock. Go to Selwyn Sports Centre and stand in the foyer. Go to Lincoln Events Centre and mix there. That's where the real engagement will come. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up this part of the meeting. And I've been spending a lot of time looking at the legislation and looking at previous ways that this has been done, looking at ways it's been done, what I can find online by other councils, and I continue to continue doing that. And I encourage you all to do the same thing as we go forward. The big thing is the Act and everyone is the rural and urban divide. Now, whether that's shrouded in terms like communities of interest or whether there's anything, it really is it all boils down to that rural and urban divide. I wanted to challenge this group to start thinking about it in terms of looking at it in terms of the geography of our district, the rating, where rates come from in our district and the population base. But the Act is clear that it is the population base is the determining factor, plus or minus 10%. And so, while I think it's probably healthy to have those other things in the back of our mind, we have to remember that the plus or minus 10% is the guiding factor. Now, there are ways that we can vary from that, but it looks like no one's ever successfully managed to vary from that. So, and I just want to pick up on David's last point about the cold and dark halls. If we ask our community to come to an evening meeting in a cold and dark hall, when we arrive there, all we get is a cold and dark hall. So I love that. All right, before.
I think you're right on what you're saying around the numbers. After the last review, the Local Government Commission came and gave some thoughts on all the reviews that had occurred across the country to National Council for LGNZ. And one of them was how much emphasis the review committees and councils had placed on that plus or minus 10%. And they were actually encouraging a greater challenge to that, where that was deemed appropriate by the local bodies. And so, like ECAN did that, I think, last time round with South Canterbury, and making sure that they broke it to try and have 2 members from South Canterbury there. And there are a few other examples of where that had been broken. So while it is guidance and sits here in legislation as something that, you know, is really high priority, I think if through the engagement with our community, we find there's some really compelling reasons to deviate, we need to argue that out. You know, we need to tease it and try and understand where that sits. And I think that often will come down to the questions that we ask our community. And if we say, hey, so do you want 7 councillors or 11 councillors? Like, I mean, no one really cares about that. Or what do you want Selwyn District Council to like? That's not a question that I think is in most people's frame of mind. But if the questions are actually relevant to people to try and understand the demographics of our community and the connections in our community and how people function and what people's days look like, and then we do the governance work that is actually unpacking that, and let's not make the community do our work for us by asking them to step into spaces that isn't their normal place. And unless they want to volunteer into that, of course. But actually, there's a whole lot of data and feedback that we can receive, and great comms and engagement team that can do a lot of that work for us, and then we sit through and spend some time unpacking it. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. So I spoke to Sam before the meeting, and one of the consistent things that have come out from what everyone said is around the lines that get drawn on the map. And we're of course all elected. The elected members here are elected within our ward. So I've asked Sam to effectively to do regular litmus tests to ensure that we stay above our democracy. And by that, I mean that Sam's the only one selected over the entire place, but to make sure that we that he's going to tell me, hey, Phil, are you aware that that the committee today was talking about hatch protection as opposed to the district as a whole? It goes even further. We need to be a litmus test to ourselves to make sure that we move the group in the direction that we want to go in, and that we accept that this is our task ahead of us, and we don't have too much mission creep in there. We have to hold ourselves accountable for the work that we're doing. We're starting early, which is a good thing. It means that we have time now to understand what our communities of interest are, to ask the questions, to get out there and make sure that we know where the community sees themselves. So in September, when the Statistics New Zealand information comes out, which normally comes out in November, then we will be able to then be well prepared to start to consider the numeric data once we've already got that qualitative data on board. So if there's nothing else to any more comments before we go ahead.
I've got a comment.
Yep.
Through you, Phil, David, we have a community satisfaction survey, and we rate very reasonably highly in that, don't we? Is anything in that survey about our representation?
Natasha, have we got one coming up this year?
We've just reviewed a lot of research which included the customer satisfaction survey.
You put your microphone on, so just the right hand button. We'll pick it up.
We just reviewed secondary research, which we for the purpose of the LTP. And that did show a 92% satisfaction rate across the community, but there's some fairly obvious gaps in terms of the audience. So for the LTP engagement process and strategy, we're looking at who the people are that we want to engage that we don't yet know, and that centres around the Māori population, obviously within the community, the more diverse cultural groups in the community, just to understand why they choose Selwyn as a place to live and work, and why they have obviously chosen to not engage with us at this point. So there is some good research out there, but there are some pretty big gaps which we'd need to address here as well. And for LTP, we are looking at a different way of engaging those people through the standard sort of charrette program. So that's where we choose who we want a good representation from. Then we're looking at Huiana. So we go to the community where they are most comfortable and engage with their leaders or their kaumatua, whoever it might be, and then also being present at places of interest, so places of mass gathering, like David mentioned. So I think we should probably look to apply the same principle here for our engagement strategy. But yes, the satisfaction rate is quite high.
Yeah. The reason why I asked that question is the other thing we also look at, of course, is whether we still have a ward system or whether we're councillors as a whole, at large across the whole.
Absolutely.
That's why I was just sort of, my brain was running.
So that was actually part of the welcome. So thank you, and welcome.
Check that one off.
Yeah, take that one. So this is going to be a very long meeting. We might need to extend our time here. Any apologies for the meeting? We've got one apology from Ken. I think he's the only one who's not here, so we'll record that. Someone want to accept that apology? Move that we accept that apology. Move to Sam and Shane. All those in favour, against, abstain, carried. Next one is any conflicts of interest.
No, there've been none. This meeting, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The next item on here is the terms of reference. Page tab number 4 in your on page 4.
So, Mr. Chair, that is as with all council committees now, we are including the terms of reference just as a reminder of the guidelines that govern our discussions.
Any comments on the terms of reference?
Nope.
Nothing. The only comment I would make is that we did think we had a conversation around the Runanga representation and the youth council representation as members on here. is there a better way for us to be engaging those two groups? When it says TBC on here, does that mean TBC who it's going to be, or TBC
Yeah, so-
whether they're on there?
So in the report later on the agenda, Mr. Chair, we're dealing with that under items 2 and 3 of that report.
Thank you. Someone move that we adopt those as our terms of reference. Malcolm and Lydia, need more conversation? All those for, against, abstain, carried. The next item on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. I will assume that they've all been read. Any comments, any modifications? So I want to move that we accept it as a true and accurate account. Thank you, Sam. Anyone want to second that? Thank you, Lydia. All those for?
Aye.
Against, abstained, carried. All right, next item on the agenda is the manager's report.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Naomi, can I just get you to hand some material out to everybody? So this is pretty much a holding pattern meeting in terms of the report, just to bring us up to speed. So first item on there, Murray State, who's known to most of you, was heavily involved in the representation review process. Murray was the guy that did all the mesh blocking and prepared the options for our last review. I think at last count, there were 27 different options that we considered, from 7 through 11 councillors, from district at large through, I think we did one for 5 wards at one stage as well. Mr. Chair, as you've stated, those mesh blocks will be out later this year, but in the interim, we have formally engaged Murray to again lead through that same process as last time. So the advantage of that is his knowledge and experience, not only of the process, but of those options and the whys, the why we chose or discarded, as the case was, certain options, where the pressure is on the mesh blocking as well. What I've handed out, not for discussion, but just for your subsequent reading, is a draft work program that Murray has put together, identifying the key things that we need to do, and the chair will speak to this later on, particularly around the September meeting and the pre-engagement process, which will probably be I imagine, the centre of discussion at our next meeting. I'll take questions at the end of the report, Mr. Chair. I'll just go through each of the items. Youth Council are one of those TBCs that are included in the terms of reference. My personal view is that it would be prudent to have representation from Youth Council, particularly as we're looking at voting age. Is it 16? Is it 18? But more importantly, the big gap that Natasha talked about, in my mind anyway, is the 18 to 35-year-olds who are just not engaging in the voting process. There are other priorities in their life. So it's a matter of trying to bridge that gap a wee bit. The only cautionary note I would give, Mr. Chair, is that if Youth Council representatives and indeed Runanga representatives are going to be added to the committee, we won't be able to meet at this time of day, possibly not even this day of the week. So you're going to be looking more like a 4 o'clock or a 5 o'clock meeting. With respect to the Maori wards, the Mayor will speak after this report to conversations that we have initiated with Aotearoa Runanga in terms of engaging them through the process, and also bringing membership to the subcommittee as well. Next item on the agenda, Mr. Chair, is the engagement with communities, and I think you've covered that rather well already this morning. STV, or first past the post, that'll be the first real decision they will make. If you go with first past the post, you know it's nice and clean cut, and by 2:30 on Saturday, the 6th, 7th, 8th of October, you'll know what the answer is. If you do STV, you could be waiting a few days. But it's around what is the community comfortable with? And my advice would be that's a fairly clear-cut yes/no question when we go out and consult with our communities. And for the information of the committee, we've just put a reminder of the proposed meeting dates. In fact, you probably take out the word proposed. These are the meeting dates that have been locked into calendars, and in Murray's work program, they're aligned with those ones. Obviously, the work of the subcommittee will continue extensively into next year, but procedurally, we only identify our meeting dates on a calendar year basis rather than a operational year basis. So happy to answer any questions on that, Mr. Chair, but as I say, pretty much holding comments other than your thoughts on the membership matters.
Okay, thanks, David. I guess one of the things I'll just throw out there before we ask, as we've got comments as we go around, is around representation versus consultation. And we need to maybe, do we need the representatives here, or do we need to have a robust way that we go out and actually consult with them, and that way there? So, Sam,
thanks for that. And those comments, Chair. I think that's an important distinction. And having a youth councillor here doesn't mean that's the end of the engagement with our youth population. And actually, just having the engagement with the youth council is an engagement with the Selwyn's youth population either. So, thinking about how that happens, I think is important. Our current terms of reference has a Selwyn Youth Council representative in here at this meeting as a part of this committee, and that council said yes, that's what we want to happen, and this group said yes, that's what we want to happen. So from here, I would see that that's a conversation that you'd have with the chair of the youth council about how they would like to appoint someone to this group, and then we would have the discussions around what that engagement would look like and how it might work and how things would be, and we don't need to unnecessarily shuffle everything ahead of that. So, and we've got some council members who are on the youth council, and Lydia may have already had those discussions. So it'd be good to hear where that's at. With the Taumutu and Ngāi Tuahuririri participation, they will be members of this committee once they have appointed their people, and there's some correspondence that email correspondence that I'll share with the room around with the meeting, which can be tabled and used as a part of the information that we're making future decisions on, because the engagement from Mana Whenua has been clear in their response to us when I asked about their views on Māori wards and their commitment to having representatives on our committees of council. And Liz is happy to meet and have a conversation about Māori wards and participation into this space. And Tanya has come back and said their view hasn't changed from last time, and there's no need to meet to discuss that any further. And that is that they do not support Māori wards, and they are still committed to having Ngāi Tuahuririri representatives here with us in our committees. So we just need to think about how we respect those views, and then also what that means for our further and wider engagement with Tangata Whenua in Selwyn. And yeah, I think that we also need to, I mean, because the terms of reference are pretty clear and have already said where that sits, it's the same with the Audit and Risk Committee and the conversations there. We've got a membership. We've said that there'll be an external person added. It's been approved by council to get to that point. And now we're going through the process of getting that external person put on. I don't see these three members as being any different. It's been approved. It should be happening. And unless there's any change in the feedback from the youth council around their desire to participate, then yeah, I'm not sure that we're changing the membership of this group ahead of time.
No.
Yeah, I was just thinking about getting our youth involved, which I'm fully in support of. I was just thinking, we were talking previously about how we're going to get into communities. Perhaps we could approach our high schools to talk to the 11, 12, 13 years, or 10, 11, 12s or whatever, to introduce them to what we're doing as far as the representation review and why we're doing it as part of the process. Because I mean, I think, you know, my opening comment earlier was about the lack of education in our schools and the lack of people knowing. And yes, our youth council are a group of young people who have put their hand up and said they want to be involved. But if we can, as far as our engagement process, move further into that high school area, just wondered if it's appropriate and whether is there anything we could do in that way to get a bit of conversation going with a larger group of young people. Sam's comment that triggered me was that not everybody's on the youth council. And with the debate about allowing people to vote at a younger age, it's probably foremost in the minds of young people at the moment that they could be. So, yeah, just a thought.
Thanks, Malcolm. Lydia.
I'll talk a bit about the Youth Council. So we met last month, and Mr. Ward was going to attend, but he had a conflicting schedule. So I initially had a brief conversation with some of the Youth Council members, and we have at least 2 members that are expressing interest or extreme interest in this, and they are very highly engaged young people, which I think is fantastic. So I really want to see one of these people here with us. Now, we do need to bear in mind our schedule, and we would have to change our meeting times so that they can attend. Obviously, school was more important that they are there. So we'd have to look at that. And our next meeting is the 28th of June at 5 p.m. So I'm hoping that Mr. Ward, in some of his last days of service to us, may attend and talk to the Youth Council about this engagement, and we could try and find one of these youth to attend with us.
So for the record, it's actually in my diary.
That's it. Thanks, Lydia. That's great. Anything else?
No, that's it around that. Yeah.
Shane.
Tēnā tātou, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the conversations around the table. Absolutely support our youth being a part of the conversations going forward, and engagement. I guess when we've talked about previous committee meetings around engagement, usually gets a lot of engagement when you're potentially taking something away or there's some sort of drastic change. So definitely should be considered district-wide, and the potential for changes or cuts will definitely get engagement happening throughout the communities. I just had track change perhaps, and the use of words, and we're using tangata whenua. In my opinion, the word should be changed to mātā waka, and that be used instead of tangata whenua, as is evidenced in other councils throughout the motu. Mātā waka means confederation of all tribes, all nations, and all people. That's the rangatiratanga of that name, and would suggest that any future reference be made mana whenua, mātā waka in that sense. Going back to the engagement part of it, I think what we do and why we do it is important, and getting that message out there. Who are we? What we do? Why is it important that you engage? And a better conveyance of that to our young people and to our people in the rural areas will get more engagement. I actually prepared something to read here, and it was just a reflection on the past to the future and what has happened up to that point, and then some points around engaging into the future. So Wednesday, the 28th of October, which was actually one of the meetings that we had previously in 2020, the day of He Whakaputanga, which is actually the Declaration of Independence. I'm elected as the representative for Ellesmere, and also in that purpose, reflective of not only the community that I represent, but also those of us in the district, in my opinion. The minutes recorded, mana whenua gave a position, but mātā waka didn't. I asked the subcommittee to consider a poll, to which the answer was some of those questions will be answered during pre-consultation, would provide the opportunity to reflect on this, and that a separate poll on the matter would not seek at this stage. In my words, however, the answer predetermined the option to notify the public that 5% of the voters can demand a poll should it be required, which according to the Elections Act can be held at any time. The 9th of June 2021, the next meeting minutes record that I asked Council that full consultation was not held, and that we as a subcommittee and Council failed to uphold our constitutional obligations under Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Local Government Act. And at the next time we have this review, which is now, we will consult with all Māori. I acknowledge Sam through the review and this Council, we hung Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which my tūpuna signed in our chambers, and I do look forward to Ngāi Tahu deed of settlement being hung with King Charles at some time into the future. I recommend that a more targeted engagement process be implemented. We've heard through our long-term plan, our council representation to the executive board of Te Taumotu, that engagement that concerns Māori, not Ngāi Tahu, is for council to decide. I commend and support in the first instance through this committee and the public notification of a poll. Local Government Electoral Legislation Bill, Gavin Beattie, a former Local Government Commission Senior Advisor, wrote the following excerpts. The Local Government Electoral Legislation Bill has been reported back to the Parliament by the Governance Administration Committee, and at that time, and at the right time of writing, awaits its second reading. I think it's on its way to full Parliament now. A key provision in the bill makes it mandatory for councils that do not have Māori wards or constituencies to resolve whether to have specific Māori representation. In my own words, the Waikato District Council introduced 5 Māngai Māori in 2018 to represent iwi and Mātā Waka. Māori living in Hamilton, affiliated with iwi outside of Waikato Taunui's rohe on all council committees. Following a review of this model, the council recently voted to reduce the number of Māngai Māori from 5 to 3. They will also only sit on and vote the 3 council committees, those being Infrastructure and Transport, Strategic Growth and District Plan Committee, and Community and Natural Environment Committee. Māngai Māori are nominated by key Māori partners and stakeholders based on skill, knowledge and experience. Waikato Regional Council and Wairoa District Council may also review their specific Māori representation ahead of the 25 elections. The amended provisions will not apply to Bay of Plenty Regional Council, which has its own legislation. In order to make well-informed decisions, councils will need to engage with iwi, Māori, on whether Māori wards constituencies should be established in their area. Selwyn already has well-established relationships and protocols with local mana whenua and decided to appoint mana whenua representation. In my own words, should this committee support Mātā Waka representation, the correct place to do this would be through a public notification. As in the absence of the inclusive process Waikato for Mātā Waka, the responsibility is with this council. Also has been expressed by mana whenua. Should this be accepted, then engagement should be a priority within a 2-month period, likely to be a minimum for necessary preliminary engagement. Working back from the December deadline, it means council should give initial consideration to issues and options relating to specific Māori representation. It goes on and on, but I'll get to the point. And I'm happy to table this, what I've written here. Numbers here. The total Māori population, forgive me, Mr. Chair, I've just lost my track here. Here, according to the latest New Zealand Parliamentary Services Selwyn Electorate Profile 2018, the Selwyn Māori population is 5,391, or 8.3%. The iwi affiliations table shows Ngāi Tahu or Kaitahu as 1,188. Mātā Waka, therefore, is 3,870 Māori, 3 times the population of mana whenua that have no voice or representation within this council. How is this in accordance with Te Tiriti o Wātangi, the Local Government Act, or the Electoral Legislation Bill? Therefore, I recommend a more targeted engagement process be implemented. We've heard through the long-term plan, and you've heard me over and over again talk about it. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to table this report, the Parliamentary Services electoral roll, and also an open council agenda of the Hamilton City Council and the inclusion of Mātā Waka here for you.
Oh, thanks, Shane. Obviously, thanks for taking do we need to?
Yeah. So acknowledge, Shane, the comments that you have made. My suggestion to the subcommittee is the prudent response would be to ask for a staff paper, which refers to the best practice that Shane's talked about, also our legislative requirements, and have that available for probably not next meeting, but the meeting after.
That also puts us in time with the time frame that you've put there. So you're going to table those. Do we need to have that done as a motion to accept that as a table document?
No, just receive to the secretary.
So receive. Thank you for that, Shane. Really appreciate you putting the time and thinking into all that. And I look forward to seeing how the staff report comes back, so we can debate that at this meeting when it comes back.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, I'll move on to, is there anything else on David's report? Otherwise I'll wrap up that part of the report. Right, David, anything else from you?
No.
Someone to move that we receive that report? Second, Shane, thank you. Malcolm and Shane, all those for, against, carried. That is all we have for our meeting agenda.
So at the next meeting, Mr. Chair, which is scheduled for July 11, we're going to, and reading off Murray's notes here, just agree the timeline that is going to be undertaken for community engagement, and possibly also give some thought to the style of that engagement and the outcomes we're looking for. And the August one, as you can see, we've already identified the issues that Shane has correctly raised today, and they'll be reported back then. We'll also get a report from Murray just in terms of some of the work, outlining some of the work that was done previously.
Yep.
So for the record, I've shared already with the chair the options that were considered 2-3 years ago, and again, just going back for the benefit of new subcommittee members, why those were identified, why they were rejected, and where the pressure points have been identified for the 25 election.
So I've met with Murray, and Murray provided me with this report here, which those of you who are on the review received last, in fact, all councillors. I've shared it with Lydia because Lydia wasn't here last time, but you've all seen, which is basically it's the representation review alternatives paper outlining all the alternatives and the 4 options that were considered last time, just so we know that the path. Malcolm, you'll like to.
Future for local government, when is it due out?
Next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
So by our next week meeting, we will have a fair idea of
What's happening?
what's
Yeah, sorry.
what is floating.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And is this the end of our meeting, basically?
I haven't got the last cut of care.
Yeah, but that's all right. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Ward for his input. This will be his last representation review meeting, one of his many lasts over the last a little while. And the knowledge that he's brought to us will be missed in our next meeting. When he's back from holiday, we'll just have to check out his consultancy rate.
So Malcolm's moved a vote of thanks. I want to second that.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you. All those in favour? Anyone
Thank you,
against?
Dave. Appreciate that, Malcolm. Thank you.
Anyone against at all? Anyone? Just checking. Abstentions? We'll declare that carried. Okay, anything else before we close the meeting off? I'll finish with a karakia. Unahia, tapo, kia watia, ai kua watia. Thank you, everybody.
Well done, Mr. Chair.